to talk tonight about what we can expect in 2022, and we're going to look at planetary activity, the symbolism, what the planets mean, where they are, and speak about some trends that we might see. Now, in order to do that, in order to look ahead, these are some parameters that astrologers work with, and it's, you know, when you look at astrology or participate in it, there's certain preconceived notions. You kind of have to lose the right side of your or left side of your brain and go to the right side of your brain, because time in astrology, in the astrology world, is circular. The planets are orbiting around the sun. So, but every moment is unique, and that's important to understand. But when planets in the present time have made a similar pattern in the past, we look at the past and see possibly what would happen this time. And that's the way astrologers work. Astrologers have worked that way since the beginning of time, but when you know, the Magi were actually looking up at the stars and noticing, they were noticing messages, noticing the planets, the movement of the planets. And in those days, and still to this day, planets are considered messengers of the gods. So by looking at what happened in the past, we can jump ahead and perhaps speculate about what's going to happen in the future. Understanding that every moment in time is unique. There's no exact repetition occurs. And you might notice in your own time, when I bring up certain dates from the past that are relevant to this time right now, that there might be some interesting themes that came up then that are coming up again because of the circulation, the time being circular. So, or similar themes, or you're repeating something. And in that vein, you can also understand that perhaps you can remember what happened before and how it worked out, and there's an opportunity now, when planets repeat, that I can make a different decision, or I can have a different outcome, because I remember the last time Saturn was here, and my fears, or whatever the situation is. So that's why, you know, we say that time is circular, because the planets are orbiting around the sun, and we get a chance to redo mistakes, or have different outcomes, or nothing's a mistake, but you know what I mean. Unresolved issues can also come out too. But so we have to go back a little bit, because we're still under these major planetary aspects from 2020 and 2021. And this is a picture, theoretical of course, but it is to some extent Saturn up there, the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto. Pluto you can't see, it's in blue there. The computer just put it in there. But we had Saturn and Pluto conjunction, and that came together on January 12, 2020. So we can remember then this slide, some of this slide I presented that year in 2020. And we know that 2020 brought us the COVID epidemic and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement because of the George Floyd's execution in May of that year. So the important thing to remember here, the same patterns that came up in the past, if we look back, 1350 had, and 1918 had pandemics, because these two planets, Saturn, the planet of contraction, the structure of your life, and Pluto is the transforming agent. Those two planets were together in 1350 and 1918, but they were also together in 1517, when the Protestant Reformation, Luther, put his 95 Theses on the doors in Wittenberg and started a whole revolution in terms of the whole cultural, economic, political scene in Europe. And also the beginning of the slave trade was 1517. So the events when, and then the little picture shows the man in the gas mask is 1918, the epidemic there's World Trade Center, which was the two planets were in opposition. The bottom is the First World War, and the Spanish epidemic, and the top in the bottom right is the Hitler and fascism. So Saturn and Pluto, when these two planets get together, we have major structural changes to our cultural mores. The Protestant Reformation changed everything in Europe. And we've experienced even our own lifetime after 9/11. So these two planets are came up together in 2020, and they met at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And that's an important, well, actually you can skip that because I think I'm moving ahead. But the examples of the new structures of the large corporations, they've been breaking up. We've had these events lately, or in the news it's been, GE, Shell, Oil, Johnson & Johnson. People's lives have changed. You can think about your own life since 2020 and the contractions that have happened. We've all had to be in lockdown. That's a big contraction. And the people changing jobs, losing jobs. There's been an enormous turmoil in these past 2 years. So this is an ongoing situation. We also had Saturn-Jupiter conjunction at the end of 2020, and this is another major transformation. It's unusual to have all of these 4 transitions that we're still in happen at the same time. But this is a significant one. This is what met at 0 degrees of Aquarius. I put that 0 degrees of Aquarius on the wrong slide. It's actually here. So Jupiter and Saturn on December 21st, 2020, began at 0 degrees of Aquarius. For the next 200 years, these two planets of our social contract, Jupiter is our belief system and Saturn is our structure. Since 1802, they have been happening in Earth signs. They occur once every 20 years, and you'll notice that the 20-year is a different pattern. Something occurs. We had the tech breakdown in the May of the last time in 1980, and we now have for the next 200 years these conjunctions of Jupiter, the planet of our faith and our belief system and our hope, and Saturn in air signs. Air signs are a completely different element than Earth. Earth signs have been going on since 1802, the Industrial Revolution, when we actually manufactured things and we took the Earth's resources and changed the Earth. We made stuff, okay? And stuff was important, controlling stuff, having stuff. Gold was important. So now when we are flipping to an air sign, it's about relationships, it's about people, it's about how we're treating one another, it's about ideas. Ideas now become the gold. And, you know, in order for us to actually see, you know, we're just getting these dimmers, these lights coming from the future towards us. We're not in there yet, they're just coming towards us, we're just beginning, because it can take 100 years for us to really understand what the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in air signs are all about instead of Earth signs, because they've been in Earth signs for 200 years. Every 200 years, they've changed the modality. They go from Earth, material resources, to air, intellectual resources. And we go back, and I think last year we worked on that, going back to the last time the last time Jupiter and Saturn were in air signs, the monasteries all over Europe took hold. It was the ideas that were important. So any planet now that comes to 0 degrees of Aquarius, at that moment, that sometimes it's Mercury who comes very quickly, will foreshadow what this conjunction is going to be. Now we had it just a couple of days ago on January 2nd, and the news broke that Biden seems to be looking into, excuse me, abolishing the filibuster in order to get the voting rights bill passed. Now, this is a major, Aquarius is a sign, equality, liberty, fraternity, everything is equal. And so if all the planets are now in air signs, Pluto's going to move into Aquarius in beginning in March 2023. We are moving into this air element, which is entirely different modality and the way we work, the way we think. So every time that any planet hits now, 0 Aquarius, we're going to have a foreshadowing of what this next generation is going to be about. So the next time we're going to see that is January 24th this year and February 15th. Mercury is passing at 0 degrees of Aquarius, which is where the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was in December. So it's a foreshadowing of the next 200 years. A third influence, which is still ongoing, is this Uranus and Taurus. March 2019 to July of 2025. So Uranus is a lightning bolt. It's a usurper. It rules electricity. You suddenly have an inspiration. Inventors are very Uranian people. They're very quick, and something happens suddenly. And Taurus is Earth. And so Earth is solid. And so we can expect these kind of electrifying changes in our physical environment since March of 2019 to July of 2025. So important changes in our physical environment. It's an opportunity that causes many intense and sometimes catastrophic physical phenomena. We've certainly seen that. We've seen certain changes in our physical environment with the fires and the floods and the winds and the rains and the lack of sun. Shocks to the financial system. We are understanding a revolution in terms of finances. When you think about Bitcoin and what's happening in that's a perfect example of moving from earth signs to air, because it used to be you had gold in your office that was important. Now this Bitcoin has value, but it's not a material thing. It's generated by computers. That's a perfect example of this transition with Jupiter, Uranus, and Taurus, these changes in what we value. And that brings the hope that there's going to be inventions, technological inventions, more eco-friendly technology, exploring new ways to counter pollution. That's what's happening, with things like kelp. That we can be a food source for kelp. Kelp can also clean up the waters, and there are initiatives out here, particularly because we live on surrounded by so much water, to use kelp farming and to actually pull the nitrates out of the sea and of the water, so that we have healthier water. All these unusual inventions. Uranus invents things, okay? Unusual inventions, and it's very progressive, and that's what's happening ongoing as well. And also, I like this. It's not from the time. It's probably looks like it's a turn of the century, but you remember in December of 2017 when the Tunisian fruit seller immoled himself, he burned himself up, and because he was selling his fruit on his little stand, his fruit that he grew, that he tended. He was a farmer, and he got so sick and tired of the public officials harassing him, he just couldn't take it anymore. And that act in December it started the whole Arab Spring, December 2010, it started the whole Arab Spring movement, the revolutions, the revolts, what's happening. These one person can make such a difference. The Arab Spring happened, remember that? And then we had European summer, and then we had the Occupy Wall Street in the fall. So it's this beginning of this turning, this upsetting, this rebellion. And I think it's very apropos. It was a little fruit farmer that started this whole cycle. He went to Egypt and Tahrir Square. It snowballed. And one of the things that I find very hopeful about the future is we're turning to this regenerative agriculture, which is understanding that we're not conquering nature. We're not here to rape nature, because this is what the Industrial Revolution, the 1802 to this year, was about when we had the Jupiter and Saturn and Earth signs. We took everything from the Earth, but now we have to understand, to reverse climate change, among other things, is to rebuild the soil and not take from it. We have to work in harmony with nature. So this would certainly improve the carbon drawing down. If all of the soils in the planet were organic, they would take all of the extra carbon out and put it into the soil. It's just so simple as that. But we're not there yet. We're moving there. But there's a whole another initiative about understanding about recalibrating our relationship to nature. That we're not exploiting her. That we're not man-made over her. We're not domineering over her. But we have to work in tandem with her. So, and we have very much a local initiative happening here, and in January 21st to 23rd, about the Carbon Crew Climate Change. This is a project that was started here in Southampton by Dorothy Riley and her crew, and this is going to be a very exciting event, because this business of what we're at now can't take anybody sitting in the back seat. Everybody has to get involved in some little way to make these changes happen. It's not like I'm saying that the gods are going to come out of the sky and Uranus is going to come and wave a magic wand over everybody and suddenly we're going to be in this paradise. That's not what it's about. It's about our taking on our own power, which is a co-creative power. And we make those decisions in our little lives. I'm part of the current Carbon Crew project, and I'm taking on this month to make sure I can figure out a way not to use plastic bottles, figure out my sourcing of my home household cleaners, that I'm not going to use plastic. And that's a little tiny thing that I can do, but I can contribute to the whole turning over of our understanding of nature by doing that little thing. And this is you're invited to come. It's a virtual January 21 to 23, but it's a whole weekend of cutting edge climate change. What's actually happening in these technologies that are changing the Earth and changing our relationship to the Earth, which is extremely important. So the fourth influence, which is ongoing, is probably the one that it's been ongoing for a while, the planet Saturn and the planet Uranus. And they, as you can see, in 2021, they're in their third and final stage of an event that started in 1988. And we have these two, this is a picture, out of that volcano can come these magnificent butterflies. It's a question now of how each of us, how we fit into society. How does society serve me? The Uranus is the individual, and Saturn is the structure. It's the government. It's the society. So we have now going on these pull between the Saturn, the old forces of the new, the conservative, and the new forces, the progressive. Now, Richard Tarnas is an astrologer. In his history, his wonderful book, Cosmos and Psyche, brings out all of the times in history when Saturn and Uranus have been talking to one another, if you want to use that word, but they've been in a geometric pattern with one another. So the French resistance to the Vichy government, the Southern Confederacy rebelled against the Union, the Bolshevik Revolution, the French Revolution with the Committee for Public Safety, the opposition of these two planets was the day Obama was elected. Remember that day? And we also had that same time the financial fallout with Lehman Brothers and the stock market collapse. So we are in that same kind of tumultuous times. And that's what is wonderful and exciting, but also quite frustrating, because you have these two battles between Saturn, the old guard, he's the old father, the old man, and then and then you have Uranus as the reformer. Uranus in mythology stole fire, they call it Prometheus, stole fire from the gods. And so Uranus has this usurper quality to him. Saturn doesn't want anything to remain the same. So they battle one another. And that's what's going on now. All of these situations in the past had that same kind of battling. So the past and the unpredictable impulses of the future are battling, old and young, past and present, status quo versus novelty. And these constellated, that's why these opposing views are so strong now. They get so strongly apart from one another that tension, a great deal of tension builds up, which is what we're experiencing now. So the desire for change And sometimes Saturn wins and sometimes Uranus wins. And we can see that in January 6th, the attempted coup there. It was these usurpers trying to take over something, but Saturn, the United States has a very strong Saturn, the rule of law. And the Congress went back and they met and they certified the election and they just went ahead. The government, you know, some parts of the government actually responded in a responsible way. So the Saturn won at that point. Thank God, you know, thank goodness for that. The rule of law won. So this is a picture, and you know, it's got myth into it, but we're going to experience this in 2022 also. And that's, Uranus is the sky god, and he comes out of the sky, and you know, he's taken there's the larger picture. I'll show it the next one. It's kind of gone off the slide, but he's usurped a little baby up there. He's taken something from Saturn, the Earth, Uranus. I'm taking something. You know, this suddenly, this something happens. So this wrangling, I saw it evidenced in the wrangling over the infrastructure bill. You know, the Senate passed that infrastructure bill in August, but it took the progressives until November to actually pass it because they wanted to have other things attached to it. That's a wrangling between the old guard and the new. Saturn, who wants to keep things the status quo, and Uranus, the progressive, wants to move things forward. Also, you can see it in the Rittenhouse versus Marbury buildings. Sometimes the individual Rittenhouse, you know, the guy had the gun and people got shot. And he got off, but the Marbury, you know, the Saturn, the policewoman, I think, who shot that man, you know, she got convicted. So there's this tension between the individual and society. And that's just Uranus and Saturn. Where do I fit in society? What's my role? So they had their third and final meeting December 24th. That was just Christmas Eve. And that's why one of the reasons it seems so tense right now is that these two planets came together for the third and final time. But nevertheless, all throughout 2022, they're going to be close to each other. And they're going to come back very close in October, at being 18 degrees. So there will be a tenseness. It's kind of we are at the beginning of the end, shall we speak. But 2022 is still going to see this battle between the sky god and the earth god. And, you know, the old versus the new, the young versus the old versus the new, the young versus the old, the status quo versus the progressives. So we can see what's happening now, the vastly different worldviews, the sudden economic collapse. Bloomberg tweeted that Goldman Sachs expects Bitcoin to reach a $100,000 valuation this year. Whoever thought of that? That's an invisible value, a piece that doesn't have any material, you can't hold it. It's in the sky. It's in the air. So
in a computer.
In a computer, thank you. So we certainly expect, you know, the cyber attacks, the fall of 2022, we might see something like that, cyber attacks in the fall. The fall looks like the most difficult time of the year. Earthquakes and severe weather from 2021, remember that? We had Texas with an ice storm, it destroyed all the electric grid. Uranus was electric and Saturn stops. That's a perfect example. And we had one last week with the I-95 in Connecticut. People were stuck on the highway in a snowstorm for over 24 hours. They couldn't move, people with their dogs. That's the weather is restricting us. Something unusually weather event, and that's part of the times. Technological breakthroughs, the self-driving cars and tractors. John Deere's announced they're going to have a self-driving tractor. These tensions between authority and rebellion, and this puts individuals struggling with your place and our place in society, each of us place in society, and how I'm meeting my group, the needs of my group. But you can also identify that, or you'll be interested, there might be groups that you will join this year that you wouldn't think you would join. It's like, oh, what am I doing in this group? This is unlike me. I'm having something new is occurring in my life. So what's new in 2022? We're in the year of the tiger. And the tiger is roaming around. You can see that, you know, with restrictions, somewhat lifted, more travel by car, more exploration. The movement with forming clans or tribes, because the tiger would do that in a certain area, and they'll join with, you know, a family or a pack. sudden marriages, the rise of the power of the feminine. You know, women are going to be on quarters for the first time ever. Finally, we have women on the quarter, or you know, imprinted on women's, different women, but they're finally on quarters, our money. So volatility in the world and revolutionary concepts criticized. Revolutionary concepts are going to be criticized. You have to decide that you're going to make incremental change. It can be sudden, but because of we haven't finished with this whole backsliding. So winter 2021 to 22, we are now in a Venus retrograde cycle. Cycle means the orbit of Venus around the sun. And if you see, this is what happens when a planet goes retrograde. It goes in one direction, and from our point of view, it makes a loop because it's changing its orientation to the sun. As you can see, it goes over the same area more than once. And so it's not like it emphasizes a certain area. And Venus went retrograde, went backwards, emphasizing, anybody Capricorns here, you're going to notice it more especially than other people, or if you've got Capricorn, your moon in Capricorn or something like that. But Venus wants us to change our values. So this Uranus will change our values. What do we really want in terms of our place in society? So this, the retrograde cycle that we see is the fact that Venus is an evening star now, and we're going to see Venus disappear into the sun. And about January 9th, you should definitely have maybe you wake up and you have an illumination of something that you really want, because Venus will marry the sun then. And sun is the purpose of our lives, and Venus is the vehicle that, what do we desire? What do we want? What about our relationships and our place in society? How do we see ourselves in society, and what contributions we can make? So January 9th would be a very interesting moment to actually be conscious. Oh, am I coming up with a new idea, a new value that I want, something I want that I don't have? So Capricorn wants to build structures and institutions, and Venus retrograding offers a reset, desires, relationships. And also, because as I said before, something goes retrograde, things from the past can come back. Anybody who is strongly Capricorn oriented, has planets in Capricorn, will notice this more than other people. It'll affect more people, different people, not everybody the same. But you can, okay, I'm diving deeper into something. We all have to do that, go a little deeper. So in the spring, this is part of the winter time, Venus and Mars have two conjunctions. This is a very sexy kind of combination, Venus and Mars. Mars is there and Venus is waiting. You know, Venus receives, Mars is aggressive. And when they come together, they're going to come together February 10th in Capricorn again. Capricorn is getting a lot of energy. And, you know, the Capricorns kind of have to move up to the plate in a way. So they're getting a lot of stirrings here. March 7th, they're both at 0 degrees of Aquarius. There's that degree again. There's 360 degrees in the zodiac, because that's the circle. But 0 degrees, they come together, and this is going to change, because male and female are our social mores. It's how we handle one another. It's the consensus that we do, how we relate to one another. It's a consensus. And so when you have the 0 degrees of Aquarius opening up here again, we're going to maybe see a future direction for attitudes towards men, women relationships, men, women, because it's a part of the future that's coming in. Every time a planet hits that 0 degrees of Aquarius, we're getting the future, we're getting intonations. We look in the news, we look, what's happening on the radio or the newspaper or the social media that you're watching. There are intonations of what's coming forward, and that's why it's so interesting. So outdated values will be reviewed, even a new normal in relationships. It could be because Venus-Mars comes together, you have an intimate, loving relationship. You can start a fabulous new relationship, or you can start a brand new creative project. Venus and Mars, my passion. What do I want? It's a very creative dynamic. And those two planets are together for a long period of time, because Venus has been retrograding, and she takes a longer time to catch up to Mars, and they stay together for a long time. So it's a very interesting time, February and March. Now, this is one of the most elevating periods of time, and we are very lucky to be having this now, as of December 30th. And Jupiter, the planet of expansion and abundance and luck and truth and faith, entered Pisces. It entered last May, and it was in May, from May, mid-May, when we came out of lockdown. You remember that time after the quarantines of the spring, everything was opened up and everything got expanded because Jupiter wants to make things bigger. Expansion, so it goes into a sign, Pisces, that it loves. It can expand. It leaves the Aquarian, which is a Saturnine sign, is a restrictive sign. So that beginning when we opened up, and then Jupiter went back into Aquarius and in the fall, and we had the lockdown again. Now, in December 30th, Jupiter is entering Pisces again, and here we have evidence, that the CDC changed their directives. Now we don't have to quarantine for 10 days. We can 10. So it's not like the planets are causing this to happen. It's that there's a connection. It's as above, so below, and each individual of us locks on to that feeling. Oh, I can expand now. I have a greater faith. Jupiter in Pisces is an amazing meditation, immersing ourselves in what we hope for the future, the dreams for the future. And it's one of the, Pisces is a very spiritual, it's the last sign of the zodiac. It's the most compassionate, empathetic sign. It helps the suffering people, it has the most compassion. So, but it's a very spiritual sign. And so it's a spiritual awakening on a grand scale with Neptune coming in right there, which is coming in spring here. Jupiter in Pisces meets Neptune on April 12th. And this is a very, this is a possible for a grand spiritual awakening, and because Venus is already there, Venus loves to be in Pisces, or it's some kind of mass deception or great delusion, but it's really up to us, and it's part of the time frame that in many ways Pisces, I don't know what's going on, and we're all in this, even in Jupiter entering Pisces again in December 30th, we're not supposed to maybe know what's going on. It's this time to envision the future. What do we want for ourselves? And there's this, okay, I don't have to know what's going on. Do I really? I ultimately know. Nobody else knows what's going on, so why should I be any different? It's this time that we have opened ourselves up to unlimited possibilities. And it's important, if you know about this, you can tune yourself to this. If you're a photographer, if you're a musician, if you're a poet, use these energies now because you can actually pull them in. And okay, I want to create something that uplifts everybody, and that's what Jupiter wants to do. So some of us will want to escape reality more and go into our holes of escapism, whatever that may be. But for the others of us, we can actually use it, meditating and actually having visions of the future that we want to initiate. All the planets are moving forward from February 4th to May 10th. It's an important time of the year. There's going to be a fast-moving time period. There's no retrogrades during this time period. And especially, we have this Aries sign here. This is Jupiter. It leaves Pisces, the dreamer. I want to be a spiritual. I want to have compassion and philanthropic initiatives, to Aries, which is it's the first sign of the zodiac. This is a huge difference in energies. And when the new identity comes forth, that's Aries, that's the symbol. He's got these horns, Jupiter's in Pisces is the two fishes going in opposite directions. They're going in different directions. But when we move into Aries, Jupiter, expansion, our identities are going to change. And this would be particularly a little bit further at the end of May, when Jupiter and Mars meet in Aries. This is Aries becomes our world view. It becomes how we're seen in the public. So a new identity gets born here. Now, I'll talk about that in a minute, but The eclipses are also in the waters, in the Taurus and Scorpio. They're in 2022. These are, eclipses always change our lives dramatically. So Taurus and Scorpios, if you have, where you have that in your chart, because we're all made up of the all 12 signs, are going to feel the most, there'll be the most activity in those departments of life. If you're Taurus and Scorpio, in 2022. And the Taurus and Scorpio is about your money. It's about your values. It's, you know, it's clearing a path. Scorpio dies, things die in Scorpio in the fall, and Taurus brings them back up again. So it's clearing a path for something new form to come through. And it's financially, it's through your values, it's what you want. And then there again, they'll meet Saturn and Uranus. This is a old-fashioned diagram of what the node with the eclipses involve, because they involve the sun and the moon and the earth. And there's something going on. There's a dragon's tail and the dragon's head. The paths all connect, sun, earth, and you know, the moon and the earth. There's something coming through in our cosmic consciousness when eclipses occur. In your life, things dramatically change suddenly from one way to a certain set of circumstances changes and another comes in. Almost summer has this Mars Jupiter in May 30th at 3 degrees of Aries. This is an amazing conjunction because in the spring you have this envision what I want, what my spiritual life is important to me. How do I want to contribute to society? What vision do I have for myself and my family and my group? And then in May, end of May, Mars and Aries, Mars and Jupiter both enter Aries. And so this is, I'm starting out. This is initiation. This is, I'm starting my brand new pioneering effort. It's important with Aries. Aries begins things. Pisces ends things. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. It's the wisest one. It's one from all, because it encapsulates all of the 12 signs. But Aries is, what am I starting? I'm brand new. There's this energy occurring then. Now in the fall I think is going to be the most difficult time of the year. Certainly at the equinox, and there's a lot of planets going retrograde, which means that the larger social forces are not moving ahead. And this is part and parcel with the Saturn and Uranus, these battle between the two gods of change and keep things the status quo. And that's what this whole year 2021, 22 is really all about. And they meet on 18 Aquarius, and they stay there for a long time. 18 Aquarius, if you were an Aquarian, Aquarius is another hot sign, September and October. So incremental awakenings are possible. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. This is the way we kind of feel today, which is apropos because we had Saturn and Uranus, making that square in December 24th. It was like, oh, we thought we were going one way, and now we got to go another way. We've all felt that in our lives. So at end of October, Mars goes retrograde in Gemini. Now that's another kind of, a false start. When Mars was in Gemini retrograding, we had the first Iraqi war, Desert Storm, when we went in to defend our oil interests in Kuwait after Iraq went into, invaded it. It's probably the most troubling time because it connects very strongly with the United States' chart, Mars and Gemini and Neptune. And we can be very idealistic in terms of our war efforts. We're going in, and this would be the most auspicious time or the most delicate time for a good prayer life or a worldwide meditation prayer life. Because even in that 90 to 91, Iraq, when you start things when Mars goes retrograde, and Gemini is an air sign, it's talking, it's writing, it's moving, you're bound to lose because Mars is not going in a forward direction, it's going back, it's recycling, it's going back, it's resetting, it's redoing. So you Geminis out there, wherever Gemini is in your chart or your Geminis, this god of war and action, it will be in your sign from Sunday, August 21st until Sunday, March 26, 2023. August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March. It's a long time for Mars, the god of war, aggression, passion, to be in one sign. It doesn't usually stay that long. It can stay 5 or 6 weeks normally, but now it's staying 5 or 6 months. So it's something to be aware of in your own life, particularly where you're in your department of life where Gemini is. The midpoint of that cycle will be December 9th, when the Mars and Sun connect. And that's planets relating back to the Sun. That's what happens with Venus on January 9th. Venus goes to the Sun, because the purpose of our life is the Sun. And where once Venus connects with the Sun, we have a clearer picture of that. And this Mars, what we're going after, the midpoint of that will be December 9th. And then, Jupiter goes back into Aries December 21st at the solstice. There's going to be some event around December 21st at the solstice, because the Sun goes into Capricorn and Jupiter goes into Aries. There's going to be some worldwide event around the solstice next year. And these are some dates. You can take a picture of them for the fall time. There's good and a little bit, there's good. If Jupiter goes back into Pisces for that last time of the year, last session of Pisces, so whatever you didn't get done in your springtime, in terms of your spiritual life, in terms of your creative life, you get another chance to do that October 29th until December 21st. This course entails the November 8th midterm elections, which is on a full moon lunar eclipse, and right connecting with Saturn and Uranus at 16, 18 degrees of the fixed signs. The fixed signs in the zodiac, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, Leo, are the most resistant to change. And when we have these two planets, Uranus and Saturn, in fixed signs, and when they meet up with the other fixed signs, it forms a square. It's a corner, every corner is taken. There doesn't seem to be any movement. So it's going to be probably, and Mars is retrograde during that time period, the midterms. Now, it's not a surprise to anybody, but there's probably going to be a lot of fighting, a lot of mixed messages. Neptune's involved. I don't know what's going on. There's deception. We're going to probably see that play out in the midterm elections there. And for the U.S., the most important thing to understand for the U.S. is this Pluto returning to its natal position. Pluto, now, if I had a poker, if you can look down here, Pluto in the USA chart is here, 27 Capricorn, and Pluto in this is December 21st, is 25. Individuals do not have Pluto returns. It's in Capricorn in the second house of money, resources, values, self-worth. Only empires have 250 years. It takes Pluto 250 years to go around. So we've never experienced this before. And it's in the second house of money, finances, value, resources, self-esteem. So the first, when Pluto entered Capricorn, we had that. I talked about that a little bit. That was the whole 2008 and when Lehman Brothers collapsed and all of this. Pluto entered Capricorn. It entered the United States' second house of money. It's like when a planet enters a department of life, it opens the door. Okay, here we come. And we are now at the end. We had to wait all this time until this is what happened in that 2008 when Pluto entered. And because it's in our founding between 1762 and 1778, Pluto was in Capricorn. That's where our birth chart is. So February 20th, July 11th, and December 28th are the times. No one actually knows. Pluto's too far out there. There's not an exact date for Pluto. But around these times, and it's 3 times this year, Pluto is going to hit the United States' second house, money, resources, values. And we can see, like Roman Empire had 2 of them that we know of before the collapse in 476, and there were turmoil, and emperors resigned, and governmental chaos, civil war, instability, economic. And the British Empire also has had 3. Now, 1315 was environmental problems. I just picked some things out. 1555, 62. you know, it can have its good and bad. You know, it can be, there's, you know, when Elizabeth ruled, you know, her reign in that was magnificent. It was marked with a lot of brutality also. But, you know, and she was living in very dangerous times because the Catholic supporters were very, you know, she was Protestant. And, you know, in those days, we are so lucky. You know, if you, Henry VIII, you know, because he liked what Louis was doing. Well, he wanted to marry somebody else. He had to divorce his Catholic wife, but, and so Pope couldn't do it. And this is right after Luther, right? So we have this eruption of the individual asserting himself against the powers that be. And this happened here, you know, because then he was Catholic, or was Catholic. Now he's Protestant, but he kept aloof the Catholic things. It's very religious. And so, but you had to be very careful and nimble during these reigns, whether you were going to be saying the right thing or doing the right thing, whether you were looking at the host or not. You would be thrown into for treason if you weren't looking at the host at a certain point. All these things are like, it's mind-boggling. You go into the tower because you weren't, you know, there's this discussions, it's philosophical discussions. I was raised Catholic, so I understand what they're talking about. Maybe some of you do too, whether Christ is really in the host or not. All of these ideas brought problems if you were on the wrong side. But some of the things that happened here during this time were also the ending of the slave trade in England. Which is interesting. Here we go with Pluto. So Pluto forces us to deal with our shadow. If something's coming out of the bottom, and that's what something's coming up. And you know, even the climate change initiatives instigated in Glasgow have been usurped by banks, financiers, or monetary officials instead of climate activists and scientists. Whether that's completely a bad thing, I don't know yet. But this is a quote from, he's 1801 to 1850. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men living together in society, they create for themselves, in the course of time, a legal system that it authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. Well, we're still in that same kind of situation because we have this corporate, Pluto is the power of the corporation, and we are living it specifically. Now, in the Biden administration, he has made addressing corporation a centerpiece of his attempt to shore up democracy both home and abroad. So his feeling to try to combat the corporate world is to make sure that little people get something, that the democracy rises up. So, and this is what he said in June, corporation threatens the United States' national security, economic equity, global anti-poverty and development efforts, and democracy itself. By effectively preventing and countering corruption and demonstrating the advantages of transparent and accountable governance, we can secure a critical advantage for the United States and other democracies. Pluto returning to its natal position in the U.S. chart is going to bring all of this stuff up. It's going to air out the dirty laundry. You're going to see that this year. It's going to be a corporate greed, and we have lots of it. Pluto brings stuff out. It brings up so that it can be aired. As you know, you have a boil on your thing. You know, the pus has to come out, and that's what these times in the United States. Our shadow, our treatment of minorities, our treatment of the individual, our greed, our corporate greed. So even this was another event in early December, 2 days before the Biden administration hosted the Summit for Democracy. Gathering of 110 countries consider ways to strengthen democracy, announced a comprehensive strategy for countering corruption. The plan pulls together departments of state, treasury, and commerce, along with the U.S. Agency for International Development, to expose global financial shenanigans and hold corrupt actors to account, and protect journalists who dig into stories of corruption. So breaking the corruption chain is going to be one of the events of 2022. And we have a lot of evidence to point that way. We have Big Pharma and the Sackler family with the opioids, and we have the people, not everybody really understands how the drug companies operate in terms of developing the drugs, creating their own trials, creating their own testing of the trials, holding on to the data. They don't make it public, they give a summary of it. And the fact that the CDC and the NIH, their budgets are given to them by the drug companies. There's an enormous big pharma collusion with corporate greed or after money. So big tech is also, these things are going to get exposed this year. That's why I bring it up. And the big corporate food monopolies as well. Certainly the political campaign financial reform has got to be on the top of the list, as does the voting rights, you know, and getting the voting rights. We're not going to have our democracy if we can't let everybody can't vote. So what the, you know, the conservatives, the people that don't want things to change, are trying to do is to change, as you probably already know, changing all the laws in 25 states or something, so that not everybody gets a chance to vote. So the fact that Biden is open to overriding the filibuster to get the voting rights passed is a very major turning an idea. Okay, we're going to have to do this, or we're going to lose whatever democracy we have left. So this toxic buildup of this corporate greed, where money, and you know, even this little picture here, in this day, you know, the man of he wants to sell people umbrellas to save themselves. Well, you know, we're seeing that today. I read in the news today that even with the COVID tests, that some companies want to raise the price of the COVID tests. The government didn't subsidize COVID testing; they only subsidized the vaccines. So here we are having some of these labs are jacking up the price of the COVID test because they can make money and people are dying. That kind of switch. Now, how that happens in an individual life, how it happens, it only happens when enough people in the society wake up to that fact, what's going on, and pressure their legislatures and vote differently. So the corporate malfeasance will begin to be uncovered. Its time is up. This is a, you know, the mythology of the three fates. And you can see there's the palm trees and the beach on the other side of the cave. They're in there deciding things. In our own life, this is what happens according to Plato. Between lives, we decide where we're going to be born, when we're going to be born, and when we're going to die. And this is the three fates. You know, one of them twines the thorn, one stretches it out, and the other one comes and cuts.
But what are they?
Well, they're the three morae in Greek mythology. The three fates are fates. Are you know, they're in mythology. Sometimes astrology can be understood in terms of mythological symbolism.
But do they have names like
yes.
Death?
They have names, but I don't know the names.
Okay.
Something to look up. So, but also on this new corporate entities will develop also. We are going to this regenerative agriculture, and there's a movement building micro-financial systems. We're going to get big money into regenerative agriculture, and this is going to be one of the major turning points, I feel, for the year. If we don't do this, if we don't get the food system organized, we don't, we have to. I'm not even saying we don't. I can't be negative about it. We have to control put the corporate, and there are enlightened corporate businessmen. See the light writing on the wall. You think of when we started organics, and 20 years ago, it was a big joke. But now it's not a big joke. And even the Heinz ketchup has an organic ketchup. I mean, who would ever thought of that? In the 70s. So there is this mass movement, and that's why in democracy and the individual becomes so important, because the role that you play in society is extremely important. What you choose to buy is extremely important. If you choose to buy one product over another, and to go to a store where the money flows out of the local environment, or choosing local, that's the kind of relationship we have to start having with our immediate environment. That we're supporting where we live and not putting our money into big corporations that don't care about us in this little environment. That kind of decision making is behest for all of us to make the different judgments. When you have your money, where am I putting my money? So this is the shift, the paradigm shift in terms of our relationship with the earth. Competing with nature versus partnering with nature, disturbing the soil versus protecting the soil, monoculture versus diversity, and reductionist versus holistic. And this is true for diversity in our physical bodies as well. We want to have enough microbes in our physical body. We're, in most of the agriculture, the pigs are over here, and I won't go into it. I'm sorry. I'll end with this. He's a French economist, and I don't know how, I'm gonna have to shrink that, because you're gonna see the bottom is down here at 2021. It's not looking well on that, on your slide there, but that blue line, the blue line goes down here to 2021, and it starts this uptick. So we're at the very bottom. This is a measure of the good, the challenging versus the, it's a barometer of the whole planetary picture, structures of all the planets, whether the challenging versus the better, the more peaceful of the planets are operating. And we have really been in a down cycle since 2013, and we are going to begin this up cycle now. It's rather up from 2021. I'm sorry it's not forming correctly, but 2021 is and there's a little, starting a little, 2021, 22, starting a little jab up, and it's starting this recycle. So even us taking on the idea, because that's what's the important thing, is to understand that nothing that has been in the past is relevant anymore. Because we're at this juncture of all of these planetary symbolisms that evoke us that we are in a brand new age. And you can't expect your own life or your life around, people to pattern their thinking of the way things used to be. There's no past. There's almost this sense, and this very last slide, is, the castle's burning out there, and here we go. We're going to have this new relationship to our Earth, and that we're going to have to actually do things to take actions, each individual, so that we are very careful about how we, and conscious of whether our actions are affecting other people or the Earth in a positive or negative manner. Because your relationship to, it's not just a selfish interest anymore. It has to be, okay, what am I doing that's bringing positive change for the good? And that's a very important, it's also very important for democracy, because it's not like, as I said, that the planets are going to come down like are raining and it's going to be paradise. It's the fact it has to, the grassroots, it has to come up from the underneath, and that's where change happens. And the United States, in their natal chart, we have the moon in Aquarius. And people are Aquarian. We actually want liberty, equality, and fraternity, and equality for everybody. And we're going to be moving into that reign more. And so in all of us, just having that mindset that it is all very possible, and we're going to live in the solution rather than in the problem for the next year, at least in 2022 and beyond. Because we're moving into, Pluto's going to move Aquarius too in these couple of years. So we live in interesting times. Thank you very much for coming, and
Thank you.
Happy New Year.